for joining us again today. Kersten Kloss here with Netcast Event, and I have here once again in studio with me Chris Hamilton from Sales Tip a Day. The two of us are going to be interviewing Adam Metz. Now, I'll let Chris introduce Adam Metz a little bit more as we move forward here. But first, what I'd like to do is just give you a quick outline what we do here. We interview authors that are, well, right now they're supplied to us by McGraw-Hill of sales and marketing content. And we like to get them on camera and discuss their book, but more importantly, a little bit more about what's behind their subject matter, a little bit more about them than necessarily just the book itself, because obviously you can read the book. So I'll just pass this on to Chris here and let him introduce Adam, who is live via a Skype call. We don't have him on video, we have him on audio, but he's standing by. So Chris, why don't you introduce Adam?
Sure, I will introduce Adam. First of all, I want to just hold the book up. It's Adam wrote a book called The Social Customer. And I'm just going to read your bio on the back here, Adam, so that people know who you are. Adam Metz is the VP of Business Development for Metz Consulting. So, Adam, how come you're not the president? I mean, it sounds like it's your company, isn't it? I'm pulling your leg.
It is my company, but I mean, I tend to concentrate more on the day-to-day of just working with clients. And, I guess running the company takes place on weekends and stuff. So in the day-to-day, that's kind of more my role. So I just figured, be honest about it.
Exactly. It's, so the other thing it says here is you've consulted with nearly 100 companies on how to acquire, manage, monetize, and retain customers from the social web. And as we discussed earlier prior to the interview, you live in Oakland, just 15 minutes from the downtown core of San Francisco, and you're there with your fiancée, Susan. And that's a high level on who you are. Is there anything else you wanted to add or put in there?
Actually, at this point, I've worked with more like 136, 137 companies. Just brought on a couple of new ones. I work with a software company downtown Oakland, a kung fu company here. I'm just starting up with an entertainment firm down south in San Jose. And yeah, usually the clients that I work with are small and medium-sized businesses. Typically, I've done a few large companies like Hershey's. And we help them get customers from the social web, and in addition, I have a number of coaching clients as well.
Excellent. So you're a busy man then, I would imagine.
Yeah, right in my third book right now. Just putting out a new ebook next week. Yeah, so there's just a lot of stuff going on. It's all generally about helping companies figure out how to get customers from the internet.
That's excellent. That's a good segue into literally. Some of the stuff that I gleaned from the book, we'll go through some of these questions here. But part of it is, I think the social customer is from our standpoint. When I started looking at this, I thought, it's going to be all about online and stuff like that. But you've written more about the social CRM side of things. But the other side of it is, you got brand and brand tracking. So I think that was kind of one of the first things that you really talk about in the book. And if you could just kind of highlight. Your thoughts on brand tracking, why people want to track their brand, because especially in this day and age where stuff's being said about you online, you could be very surprised about what's going on out there.
Sure. Well, I'll just give you an example from last week. My phone rang. I was having breakfast last Thursday, I think it was. One of my old clients I used to work with at a large tea company. She now works for a food and beverage company, a pretty well-known one. They make a very popular brand of cereal. They make some snack bars that are really popular and Whole Foods and things like that. And they had a customer that was honestly kind of flipping out on their Facebook page in front of 22,000 people. Geez. And they were like, when the phone rings and it's a former client calling before 9 a.m., I'm usually like, did somebody die, or what's going on? What happened? Especially when it's a food and beverage company, I'm always thinking food tampering or something like that. So we talked it out. We did a couple of sessions. We're meeting up for a third time next week. And the very first thing we did was I said, okay, well, where's your brand monitoring system? Let me log in and have a look at the damage. And they're like, oh, we don't have one. And I was like, well, you're not getting off the phone with me until you deploy at least a very basic one. So, in that initial phone call, we deployed, a very inexpensive but effective brand monitoring system for them so they could at least figure out, what are people saying about their brand on the social web on a minute-to-minute basis. So that was the immediate outcome.
So, like, you're talking about, is this your own system that you have set up, or is this using online technologies that are widely already available, like Google and what have you?
Yeah, generally something like a Google Alerts isn't going to be appropriate for a company. That's just more like if, let's say you're a big fan of the Cincinnati Reds and you want to know every good new article that popped up about them and it wasn't time sensitive or for a business case, sure, use Google Alerts. That's just fine. But for anything that involves your livelihood, I would never go near Google Alerts. It's just not appropriate. So I set them up in that particular case. I think we used Hootsuite Pro or something. Costs about $20 a month. And, it's a very basic starter solution. I wouldn't recommend it for anything but a small business. But, if larger companies may use something like a Radian 6, they're now a Salesforce.com company. There's even very, very large enterprise solutions. So it just depends on what your needs are and how much of the internet you want to cover, whether it's just the basics like, say a few social networks like Facebook and Twitter, or whether you need to cover everything in real time and be able to have a 3-person team reacting to that in real time. So I'd say it depends whether you're Molson Coors or whether you're the little flower shop down the street.
By the way, I have to appreciate the fact that you mentioned Hootsuite, which is a Canadian company. You just mentioned Molson Coors, which is also
right.
Also Canadian company.
Conglomerate of a Canadian company too. So
and I'm listening to Rush as we speak.
Amazing.
I'm just
next you're going to be listening to Triumph, I think, or something like that.
Oh man, and I'll put at the end of the show we have to play Roller by April.
Oh
5.
man, this is it's great. Actually, Canadians get really excited when Americans actually even mention anything about Canada. So we're really happy about that sort of stuff.
As long as you're not tweeting on your RIM BlackBerry right now, we're fine.
Yeah, no. Everything. I'm wearing my flannel, and I stopped by Tim Hortons on the way.
Oh, nice. Good for you. And you got a mullet too, right? So
absolutely. I've got my Dave Coulier here.
Excellent. Hey, so the other thing too is the concept of the social customer, right? What is your what do you mean when you talk about the social customer? Obviously.
Yeah. It's so funny that you say that. I was on the phone with a pretty large law firm in San Francisco the other day, and they're like, "Okay, you wrote this book, The Social Customer, Mr. Metz guy. What is the social customer?" And I said, "Well, statistically, 73% to 90% of your customers are the social customer. What that means is they're using a form of social technology at least once a month.
Wow,
that's it."
So what was that stat again? 73% to how many?
73 to 90%. So if you need some statistics on this, you can use the Forrester tools. Yeah. So here's what I would use to gauge what percentage of your customers are the social customer. Go to Google and type in something called Groundswell tool. And so when you type in Groundswell tool, then what you'll find is a bunch of things on Google will come up. I'm actually going to go to Google right now and do it. So type in Groundswell tool. If you can do a little screencast.
Actually, Kirsten's doing it right now. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna try. And so then what'll come up is the top link should say Social Technographics Profile Tool. Click on that bad boy. It'll take you to a really nice
tool.
Google doesn't want to give it to me. Hold on. Keep going.
So here's I'll give you the URL. It's www.forrester.com/empowered/tool_consumer.html. Again, I'll give that to you. It's www.forrester.com/empowered/tool_consumer.html. It's right alongside a real nice book that was written by Josh Bernoff called Empowered. And so what you'll come up with here, it's a social technology profile tool, and it just takes about 30 seconds, and you can pop in the ages and the locations and genders of your customers, based on your rough data, and you can figure out, well, what percentage of my customers are truly a social customer? So I'm going to give an example. Let's say you make a soda that sells to mainly 18 to 24-year-old males in Canada, and so I'm typing in ages 18 to 24, country's Canada, and gender's male, and what I get is that 94% of those customers are social customers.
Yeah.
Wow. So that literally, that's amazing. That's a nice little piece of information that you gave away for free to our viewers.
Yeah, so it's real easy to use. So anytime, let's say your company's attacking a new market segment, and you want to know, okay, well, what percentage of these people are really social? Go to the tool and pop it in. And I think this data that you're looking at there is from 2009, but I have a hunch that Forrester actually updated the data in 2010. So I think the data is only about 1 year old. And I think good analyst firms like Forrester and the Pew Internet and American Life study, they usually update this data about once a year. So whenever you're assessing this, you can feel secure in that the data is at worst 1 or 2 years old.
But I mean, it'll give you a fair assessment, right? I mean, that sets you in your way. That's actually an excellent tool for people to use. I mean, obviously, if I'm sitting in a company and I've got at least some smarts behind me and stuff like that, and I want to go online, this is a great way to gauge what's the uptake going to be on what you do and stuff like that. So.
Or even knowing of the entire base you're marketing to. Like, I remember I got a phone call from a woman in Minneapolis about 3 years ago. She was from the largest senior community in Minneapolis, and I was a little puzzled why she was calling, because I thought she was calling about the seniors actually in her community, because I think a couple thousand seniors live there, and these people are rather elderly, 80 plus. Some of them had dementia, and she's like, "No, Adam, that's not what I was calling about. What I was calling about is the children of these folks who are actually buying the apartments and condominiums for their aging parents." And she said, well, actually, they're U.S. citizens, they're male, female, and they're in their early 40s. And so we looked at the numbers, and it turned out that 8% of her customers were actually social customers, because that's the stat on Americans, or actually it's 83%, it's a little higher. So you really have to think, who's the person that's writing the check for your goods or services, and look closely at those numbers.
So I have a question. So I see a lot of advertising, or I hear a lot of advertising nowadays about this service called Reputation Builder. And so essentially that's somebody taking one aspect of internet noise, and basically they're overlaying internet noise on top of negative comments. What's your feeling on that kind of strategy versus sort of a more proactive approach?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've seen a number of these reputation management companies, and they give you stats that okay, there's, let's say, 20% of the world is on a social networking site. And, Facebook by itself is approaching 1 billion users very quickly. So yeah, I think it's realistic that 18 to 20% of the globe will be on just Facebook alone within probably by Christmas of this year. And so yeah, you have these firms that claim to be reputation management. And yeah, effectively what they're doing is they're going out there, they're trying to find if there's negative content about your company or your your brand, and they're trying to repair the damage by putting out sort of, I guess you would say, noisy or ineffective content, when what I think you can really lead with is real content. There's a guy who's actually really an expert on this, just on reputation management. He's one of my favorite writers. His name's Andy Beal. He's based down in the South. He wrote that book called Radically Transparent. I would definitely check out Andy Beal's website. It's radicallytransparent.com. And that book, I think, is one of the best books about reputation management. My recommendation strategically, whether it's for a small business or a larger one, before you go out and hire some company to do this stuff for you, at least read Andy's book first. It'll take one day. And granted, Andy's book is a few years old, but the advice in it, I think, is somewhat timeless.
So extremely relevant.
So yeah, that's sort of, I would at least start there, or maybe go to andybeal.com, and that's really Andy's niche, is just online reputation management. He's been on CNN, the BBC, or New York Times, maybe not CNN, but just about every major pub. So I would take a look at that and spend a day looking at that before going out and spending $10,000 a month on a reputation management firm.
Yeah. It's interesting, especially now with the online reviews and everything. Like Google, for example, finally just gave you the opportunity to go back and dispute anything that's put against you on your reviews. Whereas before, up to about 6 months ago, it was just take it or leave it. It was already there. It's nothing you could do about it, right?
Yeah, but that's potentially a mammoth task for Google.
Oh,
when you
big
think
time.
about it. That's opening up a can.
It is, but there's a good reason for it. If businesses and companies don't feel that they can trust the largest online advertising companies in the world, who also happen to be search engines like Microsoft's Bing, Google, even there's websites in South Africa and China that like QQ run big companies. If they don't feel that they can trust them to give accurate search results, why would they feel comfortable spending their hard-earned advertising dollars there?
Yeah, no doubt.
So it's really a two-way street. And the whole thing with this reputation management that companies are concerned about, they don't really care that much about their reputations. They care about, their earnings before taxes. So, but they realize that, in the social customer world, if you don't have good stuff being said about you online and on mobile, then you're not really going to sell anything to anyone. Just think of some of these companies right now. Like I remember, with Occupy Wall Street yesterday, Brookfield Properties, they own that whole plaza out there outside of Occupy, where I guess the Occupy Wall Street protesters are. They had an opportunity yesterday to use some pretty heavy-handed tactics, but they didn't. And I think one of the reasons is because the backlash against Brookfield Properties online, who have a lot of probably prospective deals and bids in the marketplace right now, would have been overwhelmingly negative. So I think from a a social media perspective, they kind of made the right step there. And also you have American Airlines just the other day. American Airlines had a flight that was having some trouble. There was a passenger who was yelling, and there was a doctor on board that had to sedate the passenger. American Airlines chose to disable Twitter during the flight, which I thought was a little bit strange. There's a number of articles about this online. It happened
that's bordering censorship.
Yeah, it ran in Business Insider the other day. It's if you go to businessinsider.com and you type in American Airlines, I'm looking at the article here. I'm trying to see. They made some sort of response. They basically stated that they did and then they didn't, or there was no way it could have been blocked. Anyway, everyone on the flight was okay, thankfully. Yeah. But it was kind of a strange situation. So that, there's different ways to handle the social customer, both good and bad.
Oh, absolutely.
But these days, the reactions are usually very, very swift from the customer.
Absolutely. I mean, think about the whole thing with Kevin Smith when he had to buy 2 seats on was it Southwestern or whatever. Same sort of thing. The outlash from that was crazy.
Oh. Yeah, and I think it really did hurt Southwest's brand. On the other hand, they were a company, Southwest Airlines, that has been highly engaged with their customers even prior to social media. I'd say in terms of managing customer relationships from a high level, they've always been good at that. And I think because of their traction with their customer base, they rebounded rather quickly. Whereas had that been a different airline that didn't have sort of the previous, customer relationships, they would not have been able to rebound quite so quick.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's a classic example that keeps coming up in periodicals and books that I've gleaned is I think it was General Motors that came out with this. They were toying with this idea of using the crowdsourcing to promote one of their Tahoes or something like that. Do you remember that, Adam? And
yeah, there was some
totally backfired.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the.
It was the environmentalists. Didn't they get a hold of it and make fun of it? They build your own commercial or something.
They didn't use the technology properly. So I think that's a segue into be careful how you use the technology because it can bite you as hard as it can lead you, right? Yeah. So that's obviously the importance of having somebody who knows what they're doing guide you into that world.
On the other hand, two major consumer brands like Doritos and Coca-Cola have had pretty wild success with the same concept. So, I think, it really lies in the strategy and execution in terms of how well they can do it. And at the end of the show, we're going to give away an online course that will help your company, kind of figure out, okay, if we want to do something with our social customers, how do we do it right and write the plan soundly before we launch it?
Absolutely.
One of the questions I also was going to talk to you about was, the whole concept of social CRM. So as we were talking prior to the show, a lot of the people that come here are kind of small, medium-sized businesses or even people that are playing or working in those companies. Now, we also have people that show up from very large companies as well watching this stuff. But the concept of social CRM to people is a foreign concept, but when you kind of explain it, people, it's almost like the light goes off and you go, I get it, I understand it. Can you give kind of a high level on what it means? And then potentially we'll go into kind of, how you've come up with the 5 M's of social CRM and 22 cases of using it. And maybe what we'll talk about is just a marketing case and a sales case as to why it might be relevant for their world. So if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And one note about the use cases for social customer relationship management. I didn't actually come up with all of them. I came up with about 5 or 6 of them. Jeremiah Aoyang and Ray Wang, who used to both work at the Altimeter Group, they actually came out with the basic use cases, and I sort of took their model and added a lot of stuff to it.
And by the way, before you go into that, it's I'm looking on the book. I've got it marked here. It's page 54 is where it's laid out, and you do an awesome job of actually talking about this for literally almost 100 some odd pages just afterwards, going through the different cases. So it's a very compelling, intriguing read as well. So that's why I'm putting the book plug in, because I think it's really good to actually understand that concept here as well. So
yeah. When I wrote the book, I got sick of seeing so many theoretical books on social strategy. When I grew up listening to The Clash and Black Flag and Jawbreaker and a lot of punk bands, and I think the thing that really inspired me was these bands, they weren't telling you to go to Hollywood and get a big recording studio. They were telling you, okay, do what we do, just do it yourself and do it in your garage. And the band that did that the best, I think, that kind of woke up America was Nirvana. I remember when Nirvana's Nevermind came out, I was 13 or 14, and I think everyone I knew started a band after that. And And I'm sort of trying to get companies to look at this, to look at social customer relationship management, and first ask themselves, well, do we want our brand to be a social object? Because that's kind of the first question you have to ask before you even decide, should we do social customer relationship management? It's on page 13. There's like a list of questions here. Mm-hmm. And some of the key questions are like, well, does our company want to talk to our customers immediately and directly without a third party intervening, like a television station or a journalist? And does our company want to be able to directly engage with our customers on a day-to-day basis? If the answer to that question is no, don't read my book. Go read Treasure Island, or go read, The Girl Who Cooked the Fire. Like, I'm not going to be able to help you really. But that said, if the company wants to drive demand from their social customers on a daily basis, then yeah, absolutely. Keep rolling.
So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, when people ask what is social customer relationship management, well, it's pretty simple. It's creating and monetizing the conversations with your customers and your prospective customers and the people in your company's market, and creating new markets in order to drive revenue and outcomes.
Now, does this kind of strategy require a team or some dedicated people in the organization, or is this something that a small to medium-sized company, with limited resources or limited time, can actually implement in their world, or is this something that maybe is a better outsourced solution for someone like that?
I generally recommend actually insourcing it, having it within the company. And as far as teams go, I mean, from the data, I remember Jeremiah Aoyang kind of did a study of social customer relationship management and social media teams within companies. I'd say, depending on the size of your company, it should be the equivalent of 1 to 24 full-time employees. And if you need to divide that up, sure, you can divide it up. Like let's say you have a 4-person marketing team. Could you maybe have them each working on your social customer relationship management strategy for like a day a week? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you can cut it up. But trying to do something like this with under one full-timer's worth of resourcing, I don't see it being successful.
That's pretty tough, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, if I told you, could you pack for a 2-month vacation in 10 minutes? Like, I'm sure you could like grab a jacket and a pair of underwear, but I don't know if you'd be so happy on your vacation.
Yeah, depends on where you're going, right?
Yeah. If you're going to a nudist colony, maybe.
Well, and just for those of you who are not aware of Jeremiah Aoyang, he's a web strategist, and that's a whole that's a whole discipline in itself that's developed. It's a whole career developing on its own there. And how does your product mix, or how does your material compare to that of a web strategist? Would they be coming to you for certain advice, or is this something that you kind of work and hand in hand?
Yeah, I mean, so someone like Jeremiah, for example, he used to be a Forrester analyst, and he started his own firm called the Altimeter Group. They're a real good firm. They're a research advisory firm based outside of San Francisco, down in San Mateo, and so they advise companies, on strategies to help them thrive with disruptive and new technologies, and so that's kind of their niche. I collaborate with folks like them sometimes, and frequently, if a company has a web strategist who just isn't sure what to do about an emerging technology, especially one that's a social technology, that's where I think I could probably lend the most expertise.
Gotcha. So just kind of wrapping around, also your 5 M's of Social CRM in 22 cases. I do not. That's for people to buy the book and figure that sort of stuff out, right? But I mean, the buckets that you go into.
Actually, it's funny. That chapter is going to be available for free, and the reason is because so this chapter of the book that has all the basics of it, it's partially based on this open research that Jeremiah and Ray did about 1.5 years ago, and so in sticking with what's called the open research tradition, I too am going to make my research for that chapter open, so anyone can read it. There's no charge, and so that graph was sort of originated by their work, and then I stacked a lot of things on top of it too. So it's what you're looking at on page 54 of the book, that big diagram. It's kind of a mashup of their original research and about 7 or 8 things I added to it. So it was kind of like we were virtually collaborating, and they actually answered a number of questions for me in helping write the book.
Well, yeah, you're kind of living your prophecy. I mean, you're actually giving forward in your whole outlook on what you're doing, and that's sort of what people need to do in companies in order to gain trust and build relationships with clients. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think whenever a company comes to me and says, "Okay, we're ready. We want to do social customer relationship management," I'll say to them, "Well, let's pick 1 or 2 of these use cases and do them really well, rather than doing 5 or 6 of these use cases in a really mediocre way."
So that leads me to my next question, which is, how disruptive is something like this for a company, and how do you mold the culture, or how do you lead the culture of a company into this kind of? I mean, it's a whole change management process, I imagine.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, to try and do this without a few employees who have some sort of organizational change management certification could be real tough. And if you're looking into getting a couple employees, well versed in that, there's a good course that Cornell University in New York offers. It's an online course actually. You can get a very basic cert in online change organizational change management. I think in about a month, and it's not very expensive. So at the very least, yeah, I would recommend you have some people who are good at that. And then as far as how do you move the entire boat around, I'd say in baby steps. I mean, there are some companies like, HP, SAP, who originally really embraced the social web like a decade ago. Sun Microsystems is another notable example. Others were a little later to the game. Like Google, for example, didn't really embrace social until a year or two ago. Now they have, the sixth most powerful guy at Google, Vic Kondrota. He's their social EVP. And, Google, even themselves, when they debuted Google Plus, their key execs were not using it. That's changed now. If you go on Google Plus, you can look for their CEO.
That's actually a very interesting observation, because, I would have thought that that Google would have been trying to lead the pack there, but I guess they weren't leading by example. I mean, they were introducing all of these products and introducing what was it, Bing and various other attempts at social networking, but their entire internal organization wasn't actually involved in that process.
Yeah, so what happened was Google actually, it's funny you should say that, they shut down Buzz today,
that's it, not Bing, Buzz.
Oh, is it Buzz?
Yeah.
Bing's
Microsoft,
I even
dude.
confused my. Yeah, right.
And they also shut down what was the other one, Jaiku, which they acquired about 3 or 4
they got rid
years
of that
ago.
too,
And,
eh?
Yeah, they did, and understandably so.
Yeah.
I mean, these were social customer services that just didn't really resonate with the social customer. So it's what's the point of keeping them around? And I'm looking right now at Eric Schmidt's Google Plus profile, and so now he is indeed using the technology, and he's got he's engaging with 15,000-20,000 people on a daily basis, and that's kind of neat. I mean, just to be able to post a comment somewhere where the CEO of one of the most important companies in the world could see it, like that's one of the magical things about social customer relationship management is that your customers now have a direct line to maybe your CEO, whereas before, what could they do? Send a letter that would get stuck on some receptionist's desk,
It's a lot of transparency, which is really nice to see actually out there. That's what makes the web so wonderful. Is the it's good, it's bad too at the same time with that sort of transparency though.
Yeah, there are positives and negatives because, if you're going to do social customer relationship management, you have to be prepared for if your customers don't like something, like the food company that I was working with the other day. They made a minor price increase, this food company. It was based on the cost of raw materials. Like you probably remember a couple of years ago when cotton prices went up and all the T-shirt manufacturers had to increase their prices by like 10-15%. Yep. It was a similar thing. I think the price of one of the grains in their cereals increased. And this customer was absolutely livid. And they tried to call him. They tried to reach out to him. But in some cases, an angry customer just wants to vent, and unfortunately, your kind of arena, whether it's your Facebook page or whatever, might have to serve as the venue for that. And the marketing manager of that company, she said to me, she's like, Adam, I don't get it. Like we've had such good luck so far. And I said, well, when was the last time you went to a big rock concert? And she's like, what? I said, well, when was the last time you went to a big rock concert? And she said, well, like last summer. And I said, okay, well, you went to a show at Shoreline Amphitheater. It's like our big outdoor amphitheater here in the Bay Area. And I said, how many people do you think were at the concert? She said, I don't know, like 20,000, something like that. And I said, that's right. I said, on your way out, did you see anybody who got arrested at the concert? And she's like, yeah, I think there was one guy who got arrested. He was like too drunk or something. And I said, okay, well, you have 22,000 fans on your Facebook page, and one of them made trouble. Remember, you were at the concert. There were 20,000 people there. One of them got arrested. I mean, those are sort of odds that you're just going to have to learn to live with.
Absolutely.